When timing a mechanical watch, we use a special microphone that will be able to listen to the tick-tock noises that a wristwatch makes and determine the rate and the amplitude of that watch based on those sounds. I have two chronographs here, one vintage chronograph and one modern chronograph. They might look a little different, but both are based on the ETA 7750 movement. This movement has a lift angle of 49 degrees. So I can put either of these onto the timing machine and set that lift angle to 49 degrees and see what the health of the movement is and see if that rate is where I'd like it to be. So we set that lift angle to 49. We can see that this chronograph is running pretty well. Good amplitude. Now, with the amplitude, there are manufacturer specifications based on the movement. And those specifications tell us watchmakers where the manufacturer of the movement would like that amplitude to be. With the amplitude, we are measuring how far the balance wheel swings back and forth, and because it's a wheel, you would expect that it could potentially be swinging at 360 degrees. If it went all the way forward and backward, you might have 360 degrees. If a watch did that, the jewel would actually be coming into contact with the backside of the pallet fork and would be knocking. That we do not want. We do not want that much amplitude. That means the balance wheel is moving too far. We actually prefer to see amplitudes on a running watch somewhere around 300. And it varies significantly depending on whether it's an automatic watch, meaning it has an oscillating weight that will wind it, or a manually wound watch, meaning it has to be wound up by hand. With a mechanical watch that is automatic, when it's sitting on the timing machine, an amplitude of 280 to 300 is fine. 300 could actually be seen as a little high because when it's being worn, it is more likely to have a full wind on it and the oscillating weight spinning, trying to wind it further. So you might actually find that that watch could potentially start knocking after service if it starts out with an amplitude that's 300 or slightly over 300. With a manually wound watch, 300 is usually a good number and you're not going to have a problem down the road with any kind of knocking. So this watch has a nice clean trace, plus 5 seconds, almost 280 degrees of amplitude, and in all the positions it's relatively stable. What we can check with a chronograph is how much friction the chronograph introduces into the system and if it changes the rate of the watch. So all I have to do is start the chronograph and see what happens to our amplitude and our rate. We can see that the amplitude is starting to drop because the chronograph is running and it's draining some power. The rate's still pretty stable, not a big change there. Overall, the chronograph is not causing any problems with the running of this movement. If we take our vintage chronograph and we place it on the timing machine, we can see that this particular watch is in need of a service. The rate is so far off that we can't actually measure it. It's struggling with the amplitude because the machine actually is not able to read the correct oscillations for this watch. We should have 28,800 beats per hour, and it thinks that this watch is 36,000 beats per hour. I can manually go in and change it to 28,800, but it still doesn't really improve the information we're getting. So this watch clearly needs a service. So before putting a watch on the timer, you want to make sure it's fully wound. So you want to wind it up. If it's an automatic, you'll start to feel the spring in the barrel slip, and the feeling that you get from the movement will change slightly. You might feel a tiny bit of grittiness as that spring slips in the barrel. Then you know it's fully wound. Otherwise, it's about 40 turns of the crown, full, nice big turns, to wind up most automatic watches. From there, you know you've got the maximum amount of power in the watch to get a good reading at full wind. Place the watch on the microphone with the crown touching the edge, the metal edge. This particular movement has a beat rate of 28,800, which will show up here. 28,800. However, I notice this has 49 degrees as the lift angle, which this particular movement has a lift angle of 47 degrees. So I will change that. Restart, so that our math here for the amplitude is correct. This watch has one nice line without any noise outside of that line. Beat rate is 0, that's why we have just one line. Amplitude is 265. Rate is plus 3 seconds a day. And this is all in the dial-up position. After having a watch on my benchtop machine and making any adjustments I want, either, the rate or the hairspring, whatever it might be, everything is dialed in where I want it. And I've closed the case back. I can then take the watch and put it on an automatic machine. So this timing machine has a lot more information available to us, and it also has a motorized microphone. So it can advance on its own from position to position, and it can do all of the measurements to make sure that a watch is within tolerance and give me all the green lights to say this watch has good enough timing to pass. Or it will tell me where there are issues. But it can also be used like the other one, where we can put the watch in the microphone and see a trace. And now that it's stabilized, it gives us rate per day, the beat error, the amplitude, and because we have a motorized microphone, we can change the position, have a waiting period before it displays any information. Now it will display the information, and we can go through every position that we might want to check. This chart allows me to select exactly the movement I want to select, whether it's this movement here or one of these down here. And we actually have tolerances, so that if the rate is outside of tolerance after it measures, it will give me a red X telling me this watch does not pass the tolerances that you've set. So if we just hit start, it will actually measure rate, amplitude, and beat error in all 6 positions. And I can walk away and I can do something else while it's doing these measurements. So now that it automatically ran through timing of 6 positions, we can see what each position got us, and we can also see the average here and the delta. So your watch is on your wrist and it's always moving around. So we really want to know what it is in all of these positions at the same time, instead of just sitting there at rest. So it's good that we have dial up at 8, but the dial is not always up when the watch is on your wrist. It's always moving around. Now, these are in French, so this is cadran haut for dial up. And then I'm not sure what the B is, but it's dial down for this one. Then you have the 9 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 12 o'clock vertical positions. So those 6 positions, if we add them all up and we divide by 6, we will get the average of those positions, 6.1 seconds fast per day. We can also take the delta, which is the difference between our lowest one here, 1.3, and our highest one, 8.4. So that's the difference. So usually when we're regulating a watch, we're trying to get each position where we want it, but we're also thinking about making sure that our deviation is not too large, because you might be able to average out a watch by having negative 1,000 seconds a day versus positive 1,000 seconds a day, which would average to 0. And that might sound okay, but that would be a delta of 20,000 seconds per day, which is way off the charts. So we want to also make sure that we're focusing on the delta, which in this case is 7.1 seconds. We can also see that the delta on our amplitude, we only had 14 degrees, which is very good. That means that from our dial up and dial down position, where we have the least amount of friction, to our vertical positions, there wasn't a whole lot of loss in amplitude. We can also see that everything here is green, and I have a green check mark. So this watch is good to go. It has passed all of the parameters that are set for this movement.